Over 250,000 people die each year from medical errors, making it the third highest cause of death in the US. But what about the deaths that occur at the hospital on purpose? When we visit the hospital, the last thing on our mind is a medical professional intentionally causing someone harm or even death.
The Texas Medical Board called this emergency disciplinary hearing via Zoom. You hear and see the staff discussing surveillance video of anesthesiologist Dr. Raynaldo Ortiz.
He was actually putting an individual IV bag into the warmer as opposed to taking an IV bag out.
Federal investigators say following these incidents caught on camera, one fellow doctor who took home a bag because she was dehydrated died.
When the police arrived at her residence, they found her dead with the IV still in her arm. The Dallas Medical Examiner conducted an autopsy which concluded that the cause of death was a heart attack resulting from accidental bupivacaine poisoning.
Next, the panel talks about when other patients at the facility went into cardiac arrest during routine procedures.
The events happened pretty much when those bags were put in and then when the bag was taken out. And my understanding is there were no events that happened when he was on vacation and a period of time when there were no bags being placed into that warmer, correct?
Correct.
And none of these events happened to his patients, meaning Dr. Ortiz, correct?
That is my understanding, yes, ma'am.
Welcome back to The Staircase. On this episode, we take a look at a Dallas doctor who intentionally contaminated IV bags with a dangerous drug, causing numerous patients cardiac arrest and even death. It takes 8 years to graduate from medical school. 8 long years of all-night study sessions, overpriced tuition that will take decades to pay off, and ridiculously expensive books. But if you make it and graduate, you're set for life. A rewarding career helping those in a time of need and saving lives. But for one individual, it was an opportunity to take advantage of the most vulnerable. Dr. Raynaldo Ortiz Jr. graduated from the University of Texas Medical Branch in 1989 and became an anesthesiologist with almost 30 years of experience. Ortiz worked at hospitals and medical centers around the Texas area, such as White Rock Medical Center and Dallas Medical Center. A long career that provided him a very lavish lifestyle, which included owning a $1.3 million home, 5 luxury cars, including a Corvette, and 3 Mercedes-Benz vehicles. In fact, Dr. Ortiz had a perfect 5-star rating on US News. That was until several decades later when he became known as the medical terrorist.
Testimony continues this morning as well in the trial for a North Texas doctor. Prosecutors calling him, quote, a medical terrorist. His name is Dr. Raynaldo Ortiz. He is accused of poisoning IV bags, which caused complications for patients getting routine procedures. There was actually one death involved in this as well. With opening statements and jury selection complete, the prosecution will begin laying out their case today. In opening statements, a prosecutor saying Mr. Ortiz committed his crimes in plain sight, calling his behavior around those IV bag storage areas highly unusual.
13 total patients, including a colleague of Ortiz, suffered cardiac arrest due to these tainted IV bags. 1 out of the 13, which was a fellow anesthesiologist, Dr. Melanie Kaspar, died. On June 21st, 2022, Dr. Melanie Kaspar ended her shift at the North Dallas Medical Center and headed home. Her and her husband of 30 years, John Kaspar, had both not been feeling well in the recent days. Melanie grabbed an IV bag on her way out to help with her dehydration. When she arrived home, she administered the IV. Almost immediately after starting the IV drip, she knew something was wrong and yelled for John to call 911. Seconds after calling for help, Melanie collapsed to the floor. During the trial, Mr. Kaspar recalled the following details. When he ran in to help his wife, after she screamed for help, he asked, "Is it the IV bag?" She said, "No, it's my arm and my chest." While waiting for the ambulance, John administered CPR on his wife with the IV still stuck in her vein. Quote, "My biggest regret was not ripping the IV bag out," end quote. Dr. Melanie Kaspar sadly died before reaching the hospital. In the coming months, now tragically a widower, John Kaspar would call the medical examiner's office weekly to inquire about why his wife, who was in prime cardiovascular condition, dropped dead from a heart attack. It wasn't until 2 months later when John Kaspar got the answer. The autopsy revealed an unexplained presence of bupivacaine, an anesthesia that is routinely used during surgery. In August of 2022, then 18-year-old Jack Adlerstein went in to have a pretty routine surgery on his nose after a motorcycle accident. Midway through the surgery, there were scary complications. Dr. Thomas Hung, who was performing the surgery, testified that once a new IV bag was used mid-surgery, Jack's blood pressure spiked and he started foaming at the mouth. Another doctor came in and suggested that they change out the IV bag due to the recent incidents the week prior. When the new bag was put on, Jack started to stabilize.
The providence that was involved in his showing up at the time that he did and being able to go over to Dr. Hussein and say, "I think it's the bag, change the bag," is probably what saved Jack's life.
A routine 2-hour procedure turned into a 36-hour trip to the ICU and almost dying.
But even after Jack's condition stabilized, his recovery from the ordeal took time.
The next 24 hours were really hard for me.
And then there was this moment.
They gave me a cup of water, and I was holding the cup of water, and then they took it away, and I wasn't able to move my hand for like hours. I was really frozen.
We were told that there was a real fear that there might be lasting neurological damage.
Thankfully, Jack fully recovered.
When Jack returned to get his nose surgery done for a second time, his mother demanded she follow the nurse to the IV station and watch her get the IV bag that was behind lock and key, and I really can't blame her. How terrified would you be going back to have surgery again after almost dying the first time? No one was really putting all the pieces together just yet. That wasn't until Kelly Pfeiffer went in for a procedure. The anesthesiologist during her surgery, Dr. Chad Marsden, knew something was just not right after Kelly started showing the same signs as the other patients recently: skyrocketed blood pressure and cardiac arrest. After a new IV bag was hooked in, her condition improved. After the surgery that weekend, Dr. Marsden testified that he couldn't stop thinking about the incident and just had a bad feeling. He told a fellow surgeon, quote, "If a week from now you told me an investigation found someone was putting epinephrine in IV bags, I would be horrified, but not surprised," end quote. Later, Dr. Marsden called the administrator, Ashley Burks, to pull any charts from recent abnormal cases. When he arrived that following Wednesday to review the charts, an ambulance was already there. Yet another patient had suffered cardiac arrest during a procedure. That patient was Jack Adlerstein. As soon as Jack was safely transported to the hospital, Dr. Marsden instructed the medical personnel to leave everything as it was in the surgery room so he could review everything. When he inspected the IV bags used, he found one with a needle hole on top. During the trial, the defense tried to argue that the patient's underlying health issues could have caused these cardiac arrest episodes. For 18-year-old Jack Adlerstein, he apparently had high blood pressure prior to the incident. For another 19-year-old, they claimed it could have been that she suffered from COVID-19 before the surgery, and for a 64-year-old patient, they claimed their medication could have caused the issue. They also tried to build a defense that Ortiz was never seen actually hooking up the IV bags to the patients. However, Dr. Ortiz is caught dead to rights thanks to the newly installed security cameras the office administrator, Ashley Burks, had set up only a couple months prior in May. Originally, they were set up due to security issues in the clinic, but Burks testified that the rise in emergencies by patients played a role in getting the cameras set up as well. Video evidence was presented during the trial showing Dr. Ortiz with an IV bag already in hand, walking up to the IV warmer and putting the bag inside. You can clearly see Ortiz looking around, making sure no one saw him, and was moving very quickly to not get caught. This trip down the staircase is brought to you by Dubby Energy. Dubby is the ultimate energy drink mix packed with clean ingredients and no sugar crash. Whether you're grinding through a workday, gaming all night, or hitting the gym, Dubby Energy keeps you focused and fueled. And just for our amazing listeners, you can get 10% off your order with the promo code STAIRCASE. Head to dubby.gg, choose your favorite flavor, and enter code STAIRCASE at checkout. That's dubby.gg. Promo code STAIRCASE, or visit a link down below. During the trial, the judge denied bail, citing Ortiz's history of professional misconduct and criminal activity. One of the incidents used to paint a picture of Ortiz's past was a 2015 incident that involved Ortiz, his ex-girlfriend, and his neighbor. Ortiz and his then-girlfriend Sandy Abel had constant problems. In fact, it had gotten to the point where police were called on December 2014 for a domestic dispute. Ortiz's neighbor, Roxanne Bogdan, was constantly trying to help Sandy through the relationship troubles, even testifying in a women's protective order case, and in 2015, Roxanne helped Sandy move out of Ortiz's home. Ortiz blamed Roxanne for Sandy leaving him. In retaliation, he shot her dog in the chest with a pellet gun. Court documents state that, quote, she estimated she heard the shot at about 2:30 p.m. She then ran into her backyard and saw her dog's chest covered in blood. Bogdan called a friend who came to take her and her dog to the animal hospital. The dog survived. Ortiz was convicted of a misdemeanor cruelty to a non-livestock animal and sentenced to 25 days in jail, 2 years of community supervision, and a $4,000 fine for shooting the dog. He also had to pay the $505 vet bill. He was then fined $2,000 by the medical board for failing to report the misdemeanor charge, although he was required to do so. In 1995, he was arrested for an assault causing bodily injury to a spouse, and in 2005, another girlfriend filed for an emergency protective order against him. Another incident the judge weighed in his ruling occurred during a procedure in 2020. The medical board found that Dr. Ortiz, quote, failed to meet the standard of care for the patient, which resulted in CPR and then them having to be transported to the hospital. They also found that, quote, Dr. Ortiz failed to document the critical events and did not recognize the patient's inadequate oxygenation and ventilation, end quote. This resulted in Dr. Ortiz losing his medical privileges at North Garland Surgery Center. The why in this story just isn't completely clear. Colleagues of Ortiz testified that he felt he was being targeted and that the hospital was trying to, quote, crucify him. The theory is that he did this in retaliation to the numerous investigations and disciplinary actions he faced. Raynaldo Ortiz Jr. was charged in September 2023 and indicted the following month on charges related to tampering with IV bags. After 8 days of trial and 7 hours of deliberation, a jury convicted him of 4 counts of tampering with consumer products resulting in serious bodily injury, 1 count of tampering with a consumer product, and 5 counts of intentional adulteration of a drug. The sentencing has not yet taken place as I record this video, but Ortiz faces up to 190 years in prison, and personally, I think he deserves every second of that sentence. Quote, Dr. Ortiz cloaked himself in the white coat of a healer, but instead of curing pain, He inflicted it, end quote, said the U.S. Attorney Leah Simonton of the Northern District of Texas. Quote, he assembled ticking time bombs and sat in wait as those medical time bombs went off one by one. Toxic cocktails flowing into the veins of patients who were often at their most vulnerable, lying unconscious on the operating table. We saw the patients testify. Their pain, their fear, and their trauma was palpable in that courtroom, end quote. For more true crime videos just like this every 2 weeks, make sure you're subscribed, turn on notifications, and stab the like button. If you want to support the show and get videos 2 weeks early, as well as exclusive perks and features, be sure to support us on Patreon via the link below or go to patreon.com/staircase stories. Until next time.